This program is sponsored by Cynthia McIntosh.
My name is Cynthia McIntosh, and I welcome you to Nuggets of Truth broadcast. Today, I want to share a word with you from the Lord from Genesis chapter 26, verse 1 through 5, and verse 12 through 14. Listen to this as I read you this text in the New King James Version. It says, "There was a famine in the land, besides the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. Then the Lord appeared to him and said, 'Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land which I shall tell you. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I give all these lands. And I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. I will make your descendants multiply as stars of heaven. I will give to your descendants all these lands, and in your seeds all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws.'" And I'm going to drop down from verse 5 to verse 12. And it says, "And then Isaac sowed in that land," yes, that land that God told him to go to, "and reaped in the same year." Let me say that again. "Reaped in the same year 100-fold. And the Lord blessed him. And the man began to prosper and continued prospering until he became very prosperous, for he had possessions of flocks and possessions of herds and a great number of servants. So the Philistines envied him." I want to start out by giving you some background to this text. It is a continuation of the story of how God called Abraham out to be the forerunner in preparing the world for the birth of Christ. Yes, through Abraham's seed, all nations will be blessed. And that seed that God wanted to come through his lineage is Jesus Christ. And so you see here, Abraham began his journey, and the journey of the story continues with his son Isaac. And so Isaac found himself in the midst of a storm called famine. Does that sound familiar? Where something is lacking in the land that he needed for survival. And so he decided to move on to a place where he could prosper. And so he decided to head back to Egypt. And God immediately reminded him of what he wanted Abraham's descendants to do, and that was to go dwell in the land that he had promised to Abraham. You see here where a man of God had to relocate in order to be successful. Let me say that again. He had to relocate. Does that sound familiar? Sometimes we have to leave what we know to go to what we don't know and understand. Oh, yeah, sometimes we got to do what we're not very sure of. And Isaac wanted to go back to Egypt. He knew what was back in Egypt, but he didn't know what was in the land of where God wanted him to abide in. Oh, yes, he knew there was trouble there. He kind of knew what he was going to face and didn't want to go, but God said, no, I'm going to give you some direction. Yes, sometime God will talk to you and share with you things that go against your mindset. He goes against what you see and encourage you to trust him to see for you and to guide you to where you will be blessed. Oh, yes. God doesn't go against your mindset to punish you, but he goes against your mindset to bless you. Oh, yes. Whenever there is a disagreement between you and God, be assured that his way will always be the best way. And it goes against what you feel. Oh, yes. Down deep inside, there is a fleshly part of us who thinks we know the best way. And so what God did, he micromanaged Isaac, told him where to go. He told him to relocate. And in that plan of relocation, God gave him the fruit of his obedience to what he told him to do. You see, beloveds, obedience is a seed that once planted will bring forth fruit. And you see in verse 12 where he received the fruit of his obedience. It said Isaac sowed in that land where God told him to go and reaped the same year 100-fold. In other words, he got 100 times back what he planted in the ground. Let me say that again. In the same year. It didn't take 100 years. It took 1 year. Yeah, he began to prosper. Why? Because he obeyed God. Yes, dear hearts. Obedience is a seed. Oh, yes, yes. And what was important, really, what was important to note in this scripture, that when he planted that seed, it was a time of famine in that area. Yes, 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 yes. He moved on, relocated to survive the famine. And so that brings me to my theme for this text today, that as a child of God, you have full coverage during seasons of famine. Oh, yes. Seasons of famine. Seasons of time in your life where something is lacking. Yeah, God's famine, his coverage, his insurance covers famine in 3 areas of your life, whether it is famine that affects your body, soul, and spirit. And I emphasize soul because what is your soul? Your mind, will, and your emotions. Some of us, famine does not affect the things we have. It affects our mental status. You know how some things will try to drive you to do things outside of the norm, where you just break down. And what God will do, he will bring forth what you need to cover you during that season of mental turmoil. Some of us, it's not about what's happening to us. It's about what we're thinking that brings us to a place where we need God to cover us. He needs to bless us. And I want you to know that anything that threatens the survival of these things in your life will face God's vengeance. Let me say that again. Anything that threatens your body, your soul, and your spirit will face God's vengeance. Why? Because these three things are connected to his plan for your life on this earth. Your body is important to him. Your mind is important to him. Your spirit is important to him. Oh, yes. The 2 things that God will do to protect you. I call it replacement coverage. It's coverage for the replacement of things lost, but needed to complete his will for your life. It could be your home, your car, your land. It could be your job. It could be your health physically and mentally. And I emphasize this mental coverage. God is concerned about your state of mind. He is concerned about the satanic attack against your mind when it comes to the things you're responding to. You see, many times we're affected by the things we see and by the things that we know, things that we're experiencing with our 5 senses. But know this, but that God has coverage. He'll give you back what you've lost. Replacement coverage. The second things he will deal with, he'll give you what I call a shield of protection against the potential for loss during seasons of famine. He'll give you a shield of protection to protect you where the trouble passes over. Yeah, it comes with no effect on your current circumstance. And this is the case with Isaac. It said, and then Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year. Yeah, the place where God told him to relocate to. The place where God told him to go to be blessed. He sowed in that same year 100-fold. The man began to prosper and continued prospering until he became very prosperous. For he had possessions of flocks and possessions of herds and a great number of servants. So the Lord envied him. So let me give you this great truth from this text. God is not affected or hindered by any way by famine. Their hearts. God's provision does not depend on earth's problems. God is not worried about famine or the economy. You see, famine, which could be the scarcity of food, water, or anything needed to stay alive. A general want of provisions sufficient for survival. That's what famine could be. It includes absence of money needed due to higher prices than normal for things that we need. I call this inflation. Yeah, inflation is an element of famine. Yeah, in inflation, three things increase: the price of things, the volume of money circulating in the economic system, and available for credit for purchase of things. What am I trying to say? Famine is a form of inflation. And know this, it's threatened by God's love for obedient, committed followers of Christ. Let me say this again. Famine in the form of inflation is threatened by God's love for obedient, committed followers of Christ. Oh yes, dear hearts. As you obey God, as you stay committed, as Abraham did. That's why Isaac was blessed, because of his daddy's obedience, his commitment, and his faith to see through the eyes of God. Abraham ignored the evidence of the five senses and trusted the evidence of God's hidden treasures to come. You must do the same. God will attack the threat of famine in his life to save his purpose in your life to please him. Well, beloveds, I've got to go. God bless you, and I hope to share again with you on next week.
This program was sponsored by Cynthia McIntosh. Be sure to check out the podcast for this program on FamilyValuesRadio1010.com. To find it, just go to the website and click on the podcast link at the top of the page.